Alright, here's my review of Gladiator II. Hi, it's Brian. Welcome to the awards contender, and what a weekend this has been. I saw Wicked a couple days ago. I just got back from Gladiator II, which, let me start by saying, I think is a better movie than Gladiator 1. I have talked about on this channel before. I made a video in recent weeks where I talked about Oscar wins I hate that everyone else loves. That Best Picture Oscar win for Gladiator is not one of my favorites. I went into that movie in May 2000 with a lot of anticipation, and it did not deliver for me at all. I admired the performances. There are things in that movie I like, but overall, it doesn't do a whole lot for me. I have never understood why that film was so popular, why it won Best Picture at the Oscars. I do think that's one of the lesser victories in that category of the last 30 years. I know a lot of people absolutely love Gladiator, so going into Gladiator 2 today, I was kind of intrigued how this was all going to shake out because I'm not a big fan of the first one. So it's not like the first movie is 5 stars, 10 out of 10. So boy, this sequel better be frickin' amazing or I'm gonna walk out of the theater super disappointed. I was in a good spot, I'd say, in that this movie didn't have to be incredible. It just had to be good. It had to be engaging, entertaining, action-packed, filled with some very good performances, which Gladiator 2 is and does. This is a solid film. It's not one of the best movies of 2024. Those early reviews of Gladiator 2 made it sound like it was just going to be extraordinary. It's not that at all. It's more serviceable, I would say. In every way imaginable, from the performances to the storytelling to the technical aspects. Everything is rock solid in this movie. I didn't walk out disappointed. I was well, I might be one of the few who prefers the sequel to the first one, because while the first Gladiator, I think, has a lot of lulls in that story and has really muddled cinematography at times, especially when there is visual effects, I found the look of Gladiator 2 much, much better than the original, and this film has a much leaner pacing to it. There aren't a lot of scenes that go on and on and on. Anytime there's a moment where I'm okay, we can get to the next scene, the next part, Ridley Scott just takes us to the next section, the next bit of the story, and there's really no time to take a breath in a way in Gladiator 2. This could have been a 3-hour plus movie, but Ridley Scott is not interested in making a bloated epic. This time around, he wanted to just tell this story as lean as he possibly could, and on that level, I think he did a very good job. This is a much better film than Napoleon from a year ago. I saw Napoleon opening weekend with my brothers. We were excited, Ridley Scott and Joaquin Phoenix, the story of Napoleon. And I remember about 90 minutes into that movie, I was just oh my God, this is not working for me at all. I found it very dull and only occasionally interesting. Whereas Gladiator 2, I was never bored. All the way through, I was interested in the characters and the story. The action scenes, the battle scenes are frickin' spectacular. There's one bad visual effect early on of animals, I'll just say. But after that scene, everything to do with the battle sequences, the fighting, the visual effects of other animals and sea creatures and things, I thought was very well done. Ridley Scott has obviously been at this for a while. He has made a ton of movies going back decades. His first feature film came out in the 1970s. So he's been making movies a long, long time, and he has gotten this down to a science in a way. He knows how to make a movie, tell a story, get the performances out of his actors. I thought everybody did a very good job in this from the actor standpoint. Paul Mescal, I've been hearing rumblings He's miscast in this. He doesn't have the emotional power required of this role. I think he does a very good job in this. Is it as strong of a performance as like After Sun or All of Us Strangers? No. I think something that hurts Paul Mescal a little bit in this movie is that he is living in the shadow of Russell Crowe. For the most part, so much of the story has callbacks to the first movie. We see some images of Russell Crowe, like he's the son of Maximus, and that plays a big part in Gladiator II. And I do think that hurts his performance a little bit because, I mean, he is very young. He's like late 20s, and he doesn't have the gravitas of Russell Crowe yet. So I think in terms of what he was required to do for this movie, he does a very good job. Is he Oscar worthy? Is he going to get an Oscar nomination for Best Actor? I think he still could if there's enough love for this movie and because Best Actor is kind of light this year. But now, having finally seen Gladiator II, I'm not as confident in his Oscar nomination as I was a few weeks ago. I'm like, it could still happen, but he could miss. That 5th place slot could go to like a surprise nominee, someone we're not really thinking about so much right now. But I really liked his performance in the movie. I thought he was solid. And Denzel Washington. This was a part of the film I was a little underwhelmed by, I have to be honest, because so many people for weeks were putting Denzel Washington's performance in Gladiator II on a very high pedestal. Everybody who saw this movie early was saying like he could be a frontrunner to win the Oscar for Best Supporting Actor. And like Paul Mescal, he's very good in the film. He has some memorable moments. He has some excellent scenes in the last half hour, I would say. But a lot of this movie is Denzel Washington just sitting there and reacting to battles and things. Like, there's not a ton of great material for him to work with in this movie. He's got his moments of snarkiness. He has some good humor. And his scenes with Paul Mescal especially rip. Like, those 3 or 4 scenes, I would say, throughout the movie are very good. But I wasn't walking out of Gladiator II like, oh my god, give Denzel Washington his 3rd Academy Award. He's doing his Denzel thing, and he'll probably get nominated for Best Supporting Actor most of award season. Probably not BAFTA, right? BAFTA doesn't like Denzel Washington. But yeah, I think the Oscar nomination is pretty secure. I don't think he can win. It doesn't feel like the kind of performance that can go the distance and actually obtain the gold trophy. It's a very solid performance. I do think Academy voters are going to eat up and give him a nomination, but not necessarily a victory. But he's a very welcome addition to this cast. I mean, talk about gravitas, Denzel Washington. And where his character goes in the second half is one of the most interesting aspects of the film, I would say. The rest of the cast is very good. Connie Nielsen is back, like the main person from the first movie who's in this sequel, and she gets some great moments to shine. Pedro Pascal is very good in his moments. Like, the cast of Gladiator II is very impressive. Matt Lucas is fantastic in this. Get ready for Matt Lucas and his moments. Joseph Quinn. Like, there's a lot of talent on display in this movie. I felt like even though the cast might not be like as spectacular as the first Gladiator, where you had Russell Crowe and Joaquin Phoenix and Oliver Reed and so many great people in that movie, I guess you could come to this sequel and say, you know, Paul Mescal is no Russell Crowe. Denzel Washington is great, but like Joseph Quinn, Pedro Pascal, they are not in any way, shape, or form Joaquin Phoenix. I don't really agree with that. I think this cast for this story is rock solid, very good, and they do their best with the material they're given. As I said, on a technical level, Gladiator II is fantastic. I do think the cinematography here is better, like brighter, more involving, more interesting than it is in the first movie. Most of the visual effects are terrific. The production design is great. costume design, makeup and hairstyling, sound, visual effects. Like, Gladiator II might not do super well in the top 8 categories at the Oscars. I'm not sure at this moment if it will break into Best Picture. If it does, it'll be like in slot 9 or 10. Like, it's not going to have like any chance in hell of winning that, obviously. I think with 10 nominees total, it'll probably make it. Like, it's going to be popular, it's going to do well with audiences and things, even if a lot of people, audience members, awards voters, don't look at Gladiator 2 as being quite as strong as Gladiator 1. I feel like there will be enough passion for the movie, especially in a year that hasn't given us like 1,000 amazing contenders for Best Picture. Gladiator 2 probably will make it. It won't shock me if it misses. I think this film is going to do best in the technical categories. Like, I could see Gladiator 2 getting into 5 or 6 technical categories, kind of like Dune Part 2, and how well that film's going to do in like cinematography, production design, visual effects, so on and so forth. Gladiator 2 might only get, let's say, Best Picture and Best Supporting Actor for Denzel Washington. Maybe Best Actor for Paul Mescal. We shall see. I don't think Gladiator 2 gets into Screenplay. I also, sadly, don't think Gladiator 2 gets into Best Director for Ridley Scott. Even though, like, the guy is a legend, he's never won an Academy Award, and he's only been Oscar nominated for Best Director 3 times. Thelma and Louise, Gladiator, and Black Hawk Down. Those are the only 3 nominations in that category at the Academy Awards, which still stuns me to this day. You'd think he'd have like 5 or 6 nominations there. You'd think he would have won somewhere along the way. I don't know why Ridley Scott was not a producer of Gladiator 1, because if he had been, he would have won an Oscar for that. He would have a gold trophy in his home. He is a producer on Gladiator 2, so maybe he learned from his mistakes, I don't know. But Gladiator 2 is not going to win Best Picture, so yeah, I just think in a crowded field for Best Director, he's going to be in like 7th or 8th place. Maybe he gets in at Golden Globes, maybe he shows up somewhere along the way. And Gladiator 2 is directed extremely well. Like, he does a great job with it. I just feel like there's going to be comparisons to the first movie. There will be those thoughts of like, this is just more of the same, but not as good for those awards voters and people who really love the first Gladiator and think the sequel maybe isn't quite on that level. So yeah, I don't think Ridley Scott is going to get an Oscar nomination for Best Director, sadly. I know I'm not alone on this. I'm sure many of you feel this way. We would all love to see Ridley Scott get an Oscar nomination for director and win. Like, we would love to see him win a gold trophy. He's like in his late 80s. He only has so many more movies left, so that would be great. I just don't think it's going to happen for this movie. And then in the technical categories, I could see Gladiator 2 getting into cinematography, film editing maybe score. The score is pretty good in the film. Production design, sound, visual effects. Even if the movie can't compete very much in those top 8 categories, I still think it could win a couple things at the Oscars in technical categories. And I do think it could still receive like 7, 8 nominations total. Even if most of those nominations are in technical categories, Gladiator 2 is going to show up on Oscar nominations morning. It's going to get into a lot of places, I think. We'll see how competitive it is. But yeah, Gladiator 2 is going to be a big Oscar player. Now, I would say toward the end of this movie, I was leaning toward giving this an 8 out of 10. I would give Gladiator 1 a 5. I would give that movie a 5 out of 10. That's the rating I would have given it, like when I was a young teenager in the summer of 2000, and that's the rating I would give it today. Every 10 years I have watched Gladiator. I came to it in 2010 and then again in 2020, hoping maybe with maturity I would appreciate the movie more, I would like it better. And that hasn't been the case. I'm still a 5 out of 10. We'll see what happens in 2030 when I watch it again. I guess, I don't know. Maybe I will give it a 6. I don't know. But yeah, I was leaning toward an 8 out of 10 for Gladiator II. But then in the last 20 minutes, I won't give anything away. I won't tell you what happens in the plots. But for the most part of the running time, I was very happy with the leanness of the storytelling. Like how the movie had a really nice pace to it. We never got too bogged down in long dialogue scenes, too many details. Like the movie moves along very well. But then in the last 20 minutes, Ridley Scott and company needed to slow things down. It moves way too fast in those final 5 or 6 scenes. There is a major emotional moment toward the end of Gladiator II that I wanted Ridley Scott to linger on, make us feel, give us a few beats here, and he just glosses over it in about 20 seconds and we're on to the last part of the movie. And it was too bad because I thought that could have been one of the most memorable moments in the entire film. But because we just quickly cut to the next part, the final battle, everything is happening way too fast. And I wanted the movie in those last 20 minutes to slow down. We're not in a rush here. This is the part of the story that should have its premium emotional impact on the audience. And it doesn't really work because we're rushing to the final scene. That was disappointing, and that's why I'm not quite at an 8 out of 10, but I'm still very happy I saw this film. I think there's a lot of great stuff in it. The performances, the cinematography, some of those battle sequences I am not going to forget for a long, long time. There is this scene with sharks. I'll just say that much. With sharks. That took my breath away. There are at least 4 or 5 action scenes in Gladiator II that are frickin' fantastic. And those of you going to the movie who just want to be entertained, it doesn't have to be the movie of the year. But if you want a bunch of gladiator scenes, battles, fights, some good, quiet, emotional beats throughout the story. Maybe some of those don't pay off as well as they could at the very end. But you're looking for a good yarn from Ridley Scott, a good sequel to the 2000 original. I think most of you are going to be pretty happy with Gladiator II. I can't imagine there's going to be a ton of people walking out of the theater just shaking their heads disappointed. If you're going into this movie with reasonable expectations, I think they're going to be met. Because, again, there's a lot of great stuff here. I had a good time. It's very entertaining. It's very fun to see Paul Mescal and Denzel Washington act in this film. They're both extremely good in their roles, I think. And Ridley Scott proves, after a couple of stumbles, I would say, the last few years, House of Gucci and Napoleon, he is still an excellent filmmaker at the top of his game and his craft. I think he did a very good job with Gladiator II. I give this film a 7 out of 10. Thanks so much for watching and subscribing, and let me know in the comments below, what did you think of Gladiator II, and do you think it's going to get into a bunch of Oscar categories? I'll see you next time at the Awards Contender.